Oh, Tim, I'm seeing, there you go.
Yep, sorry about that.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the event. We're going to give everybody a minute or two just that shows up late to get in, and then we will get started. Okay, welcome everyone to this event between Merchant Fraud Journal and Ekata. Thank you so much for joining us. We are super excited to be able to present an absolutely important topic. I know that everybody in the world is thinking about in the start of August, which is December and the holiday season. That's what it means to be in this business. And we're excited to have Akata here to come on and talk about holiday fraud and how to prepare your fraud analyst team for success. And we really appreciate you joining. So Tim, why don't you go ahead and go on to the next slide. I am Bradley Chalupsky. I am the co-founder and editor-in-chief of Merchant Fraud Journal. For those of you that are new to our events, we are an independent, unbiased publication dedicated to empowering online sellers to greatly reduce the impact of e-commerce fraud on their business. We publish all kinds of insights. Our audience is senior level decision makers all the way through to small business leaders and experts. We love to be able to provide quality content for everyone and bring everyone value to their position. So Tim, if you could switch the slide real quick. So holiday season. We wanted to understand this year more than any year, I think, because it's really been a tough year for everyone around the globe. We all kind of thought that we'd be coming out of Corona and looking at a brand new world. And instead, we're in this very weird place of uncertainty. And uncertainty, as we know, is a breeding ground for fraud. And so we wanted to talk to the experts at Ekata to understand more about this holiday season and the manual fraud review processes that are going to help you find success. And we have a couple of great topics here that Tim is going to go into about your fraud team responsibilities. And we're really looking forward to the event. So Tim, you can go ahead. It's okay. So Tim is the product marketing manager, Pro Insight at Ekata. You know who I am now, and I'm going to give it over to you, Tim. Let you introduce yourself formally, let you introduce Ekata, and then jump right into the content.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bradley. And yeah, sorry about the slide transitions there, getting familiar with the slides and the new keyboard I got here. But thank you so much for the introduction. As Bradley mentioned, I am Tim, and I'm a product marketing manager here at Ekata, but my main focus is Pro Insight. So I'll dive into just very briefly of who we are here at Ekata and what my function is. So really for Ekata in general, and of course we're gonna, as Bradley alluded to, we're going to be talking about kind of what are some different things that we're seeing and trends we're seeing in the market and how to prep for the holidays. Just so you all know, we're happy to have your guys' questions. Feel free to post them into the chat or the Q&A function, throughout the presentation, and we'll have plenty of time for answering your questions at the end. But really, I want to talk about who we are here at Akata. It might not be a name that you're familiar with, which is okay. But really, here at Ekata, our goal here is to be the global standard in identity verification. And I want to put a big emphasis on the global aspect there. I think we're seeing more and more, especially in spite of COVID, that everybody is moving to the digital world. Just for a crude example, my dad, who is in his 60s at this point, just started shopping online for the first time last year, which is very scary to me. But for in that example, he never really had a digital footprint up until last year. And so here at Akata, our main goal is to kind of combat that fraud and give a frictionless customer experience for all around the globe and for all of your guys' customers while catching fraud at the same time. And this is just a slide here, just kind of show of some of the businesses and logos that we work with and some of our customers. We operate in a number of different industries, and these are just some examples. We have over 2,000 customers at this point. Everything from your kind of traditional banking and online lending to in the global payment space. You're seeing these come up more and more. The Stripes and the Squares of the world. Basically, it seems like they're involved in every single business at this point. Even from a marketplaces, when if you're on the supplier or the demand side, we help a number of marketplaces, and from the account opening stage all the way through to transaction. And of course, kind of your more traditional e-commerce as you would expect. But we also have a number of different partners that we work with as well on a global scale. Everything from your kind of fraud platforms that you would normally see in the market to e-commerce platforms and other data providers as well, to provide a holistic solution for your fraud program. But enough about Ekata. I'll get into a little bit about who I am and what I do. But really, my main focus here at Ekata is Pro Insight, which is one of our products for manual review specifically. So that's why I'm really excited to join Bradley here today to talk about manual review and how you can kind of prep for the holidays and get ahead of the game. Obviously, it is weird to think that we are only in August, but we're thinking about the holidays. Normally, I wouldn't think about the holidays at all. I was just hearing on the radio the other day of Christmas in July, which just totally made me cringe a little bit, saying that we're already halfway through the year. But I want to talk a little bit about what's at stake. I think it goes without saying that in spite of COVID, times are definitely changing. When you look back, 15 to 20 years ago, even before really there was too much shopping being done online, folks were really required to go into a store, walk down the aisles, pick up their products, put them in a cart and check out, and then they go home. But we're seeing more and more that that's not as relevant as it used to be. There's a time and a place for us to go into the store. I, for one, very much still like to enjoy to go in and test products, take a look at them, hold them in my hand before buying them. But we're seeing with COVID, these trends that you're seeing up on the screen, such as buy online, picking up in store. Oftentimes you're working with an associate, they'll get you the products for you, or sometimes you actually can go pick them up yourself without interacting with anybody, completely contactless, or even curbside pickup where you're sitting in the parking lot and they'll bring your products to you, which is super convenient. But this wasn't really relevant 15 years ago. This is something that is more and more every day becoming a trend in the market, no matter what industry you're in. Whether it be kind of that traditional e-commerce, or even if you're in the food industry, and I go to order a Starbucks and go to pick it up really quickly, or even McDonald's where I go, they bring it to my vehicle. We're seeing this happen more and more. But it's one thing to talk about, what are some of the trends that folks are seeing. It's another thing, what happens on the flip side of that when it comes to fraud. Of course, customers, they do these types of transactions for a reason. They will do this contactless order pickup or buy online pickup in store. They'll do it for a reason. And the biggest thing is it's faster and more convenient. How long does it take for me to go to my local Costco or my Fred Meyer? Here on the West Coast, we have different stores than you might have, but How much longer does it take for me to actually drive to the store, pick out all my ingredients, go through a long line of checkout, and then leave? It takes a lot longer than it would be where I could just pick all my things online, or all the products that I would normally have, check out, and then they're already ready for me to pick up at the store. Don't have to go through all these aisles. I don't have to worry about folks wearing masks or not wearing masks. I don't have to worry about, if there's specific things where products are in places where it's difficult to get to, or there's a long lines. We all want to avoid that. So, they're doing these for these new kind of shopping experiences for a reason. Another thing too is, when you think of traditional e-commerce, is shipping fees. It's great that, we have the option to buy all these things online, but if it's going to be taking an extra $20 for me to have things delivered to my door, then that's a whole nother thing to talk about. But how do fraudsters actually take advantage of some of these trends that are coming up? This bullet number one there, that's not really a new trend. When I say CMP, that's card not present. This is something that has been around for a long time, and it's becoming more and more prevalent. But fraudsters are quickly using some of the stolen card information and not having to actually, swipe this card or insert it as a chip at some sort of terminal in an actual physical store. So that's just more and more prevalent. I put that one up there just because, we're seeing that, cards aren't as relevant as they used to be. The second one, and this was, one of the most important ones that I'm seeing is, whenever we think, tech, or we think, products or anything like that, we think of mobile first. And that's what a lot of these consumers are actually thinking as well. It's so much easier for us to go to some sort of mobile app, make our orders, have them delivered to us, than actually go to a store and browse down the aisles. You don't know where something might be, etc. So mobile order ahead is specifically pretty unique, just because here, I was thinking of this example actually this morning when I was just getting online. Is I ordered a Starbucks this morning, and when you think of mobile order ahead, oftentimes we're not doing it these orders way in advance. We're doing it maybe 5 to 10 minutes before we're ready to pick something up. So that actually puts a lot of stress on a business and can be very difficult for folks to actually detect fraud. Especially going back to the thought of manual review, oftentimes we're seeing, a lot of our customers, there's times where there's going to be more difficult orders to review where it takes a lot longer, whether it be from 3 minutes up to 10 minutes to do a review for one transaction. And oftentimes it's not as easy to catch fraud in that short time frame. 10 minutes might sound like a long time, but it's actually very, very short. But for your customer, it can mean the entire world, or can make or break that transaction. Number 3 there, I just want to briefly talk about some address validation, or AVS. We're seeing this, of course, more and more in the digital world, where folks are going to pick up some of these items by themselves, whether it be buy online, pickup in store, curbside pickup, you name it. They don't have to often put in their shipping address, which would normally be a really good indicator of potential fraud if there's multiple shipping addresses, or the shipping address is linked to this person's name or email that hasn't been linked to before. We used to be able to use that data and really help catch fraud or see the potential risk in a transaction, but more and more it's not as relevant as it used to be. So that's a really interesting one in particular. And this last one, I just wanted to call this out. And again, this is going back to some of those trends we're seeing of buy online and pick up in store and so on. Is from an actual in-person experience, it can be very difficult for folks to actually validate identities or identification in store. Oftentimes, if you have a line of 20 customers wanting their products and they want it now, it's very easy for you to just hand them the product and go about your business. But if it's not actually the person who ordered it, then that is fraud. And of course, a lack of a proof of purchase. It's very difficult for these associates to do both of these things. It could be one thing to check a receipt, but when you link that receipt back to the identity or the identification of that person, that's a different story. And of course, this goes back to kind of the industry terms that we all hear of, even social engineering. When you have a pretty clever person standing in line saying, "Oh, I don't have my receipt," or "I forgot my ID, but I did buy this." Oftentimes it's very easy to kind of sway these associates who oftentimes aren't really trained to catch some of these things. Whether it be they're a seasonal employee or a temp employee, they're not really trained to be able to check a lot of these things. So it can be very, very a tedious process, especially it can be very stressful for these associates who who might not have the tools necessary to do their job correctly. And so what does a lot of this lead to? I think, some of these will be no-brainers, but I just wanted to call some of these things out specifically because this is what we're seeing from our perspective and some of the data that we're experiencing from the Ekata side is, for one, especially around the holidays, some of these are very, very relevant. When you look at, why are some of our good customers getting irritated with us? For one, they're getting declined, and this is, it's something that is going to be unavoidable to an extent. There will always be a customer that, does something new or does something unintentional that might trip up a system, for example. But when you look at, what are some of these different things that are happening, especially in the holidays, and I have them listed out here. Number one is, multiple addresses. When I go to make a purchase online, let's say it's at an Amazon, for example, or any big retailer. Like I mentioned, my dad is now good but bad, unfortunately, transacting online. But what I used to have to do previously is, if he wanted me to order something online for him, I would purchase it and ship it to his address. So even in my Amazon account, I have a multiple of different addresses that I would normally ship to. But if it's a new customer who maybe has a new Amazon account and they put in multiple addresses or something like that, even though they might be a legitimate customer, it could trip up some levels of that automation in your guys' fraud program. And that's why a manual review becomes more and more impactful. Of course, opening up a new credit card, I think this goes without saying, especially during the holidays. It's much more. This happens much more often and more frequently, where we may open up new credit cards in the holidays. There might be a new deal or a new program that you all are launching or businesses are launching, whether it be open up a new credit card and get X amount of rewards points, or first X amount of dollars goes back to cash back, whatever it might be. People take advantage of those new use cases coming up for new credit cards. And so when there's not that much transaction history for a credit card, or there's multiple credit card accounts being opened, there's a good potential for risk there, but it might be a legitimate customer. And finally, making multiple orders in a short amount of time. For one, I don't do too much online purchases. I might do maybe a couple in a week, but oftentimes, you'll see sometimes people completely rely 100% on purchasing things online. Of course, you can't really get gasoline online. They'll have to go to a gas station. But even things like the necessities that we normally go to our local grocery or drugstore for like, for example, toilet paper. We saw that folks were turning to online transactions to be able to get those products. And oftentimes it might not be one transaction in a day. We'll see it could be 5 in a day. Oftentimes I'll purchase something and I'm like, oh shoot, I forgot to grab this. Let me buy another thing. So oftentimes those transactions and those orders can add up very quickly, which could trip up some levels of automation there as well. But what does this ultimately lead to? Maybe 15 to 20 years ago, before there was a bunch of social media, oftentimes, you could rely on your customer care department or your customer service to be able to reach out to a customer if they had an issue. Customer might reach out to you saying, hey, I had this bad experience. How are you going to fix it? But more and more folks are turning to online to be able to see, how is this product in the market? How do other customers feel about this? How does this company, what are they doing, in the market? How are they doing? So, we're seeing this more and more of the power of social media can really take a toll of brand reputation and have some dramatic impact. There's obviously multiple channels that folks can go to now, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, even Reddit. We're seeing come up quite a bit. But there's a lot of different places to place these reviews, and they can reach a really, really wide audience. So if one customer has a bad experience, that can have dramatic impact on your brand. So that's just, I wanted to kind of lay out the land there of kind of what's at stake. But Bradley, is there anything else that you're seeing from your world that customers, maybe new trends that you're seeing, or kind of new fraud trends out in the market?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that you hit on is the need to protect your reputation on social. And there's really, really an emphasis now on the idea that any single mistake can really come back to get you very, very, very strongly. Back before social media was so important, you might be able to have a customer that was unhappy and you would deal with it through channels and it would remain an isolated event. But what we're seeing now is just more and more people are going online, and certainly younger generations, millennials, and even younger than millennials are making increasing use of these social media communities. And the need to protect against customer dissatisfaction is not just about that customer. In fact, that individual customer is probably the least of your worries. What you really need to worry about is that one person even that decides they're going to go on Twitter and they're going to bash your brand, and that's going to have a massive impact on your ability to sell at a critical time of the year. So when you're thinking about your fraud team review and what they are protecting against, it's really important to keep that scope in mind, that the stakes to get these things correct are extremely high beyond just the dollar value of the order that any individual analyst is reviewing.
Yeah, Bradley, that's a really good point. When you think of the lifetime value of the customer, of course you want them to keep coming back for more and more. That's the kind of the whole point of why we do business, and why many of us do business is we want them coming back for more. That's why we develop new products or have new product releases, new features being released on, whether it be a software. That's why there's all these different iterations out in the market that you might see for a particular product. So keeping customers coming back for more is going to be absolutely key for the growth of your business. So, not to scare you all, but yeah, having some of these bad reviews or, having somebody, with any kind of reach or influence on social can be pretty drastic. For example, I was looking at a new laptop the other day. I was just kind of surfing the web for looking for a new product, and I always will go to the reviews, one of my first things, just to see what people are saying about the product. And if I see multiple bad reviews right there at the top, typically I'll kind of rule that one out. I'll typically look at what they're saying. Of course, oftentimes, we will see people abuse, review. I don't know if you call it review abuse, even, where folks will kind of just spam them just for the heck of it. But yeah, we're seeing that more and more where reviews do really influence the purchase decisions for your customers. I want to just briefly talk about going, less about the buy online, pick up in store, but really want to talk about just kind of fulfillment and delivery in general. And this goes back to a lot of that brand reputation and customer satisfaction. Um, I think it's obviously pretty clear that competing with some of the what we can call quote unquote big box stores is going to be much harder. Especially in these times of COVID where folks are expecting their products and they're expecting it now. Um, no matter where you're at in the world, let's say you have an Amazon Prime account, typically you can get whatever product that you want within a day or two. It's absolutely crazy that we can get these products so fast, but how do you compete with that? Especially going back to this customer experience that Bradley and I were just discussing is, there's a lot of external factors that can really go into place. But unfortunately, it does have an impact on your business. You can see that stat there in the middle of, only 80% of gifts arrived on time in 2020. Typically I try my best to stay patient whenever I order a product, but you can't help but wonder when you go to order something on Amazon Prime or you're promised 2-day shipping and it doesn't show up in that 2 days, you're like, oh, what happened? How come my product isn't at my door? It is sad to say that's the time that we're in. But again, there's a lot of external factors that can come into play. But of course, the company is going to take the blame. And this goes all back to lifetime value of the customer. If you have multiple late deliveries, oftentimes they won't come back. And it could be anything from, maybe the USPS or FedEx, there was some kind of trip up in their system, whatever that might be. Or perhaps, even from a fulfillment perspective, whatever facilities, there could be some kind of delay, or of course, just straight volume in general. especially during the holidays, when millions upon millions of orders are expected to be delivered to customers in the nick of time. That can be really stressful for a lot of different organizations. But the last thing there is, there are some ways where having tools in place can really help. Manual review is not the end all be all solution, but I think it's fair to say that manual review will always come into play for a business who sells products to consumers like this. There will always be a need for some level of automation, especially the higher and higher volume you have. You can't review every transaction, but having a process in place will enable you to fulfill these orders faster and have your customers be just a little bit more happy when they get their products. Now, I want to talk a little bit about how to prep for this high volume season. There's a multiple things you can do, and this is not an exhaustive list, but I wanted to talk a little bit about some things that from my perspective and from Akata's perspective that you can do to help out with this. Now, I'll briefly touch on these subjects a little bit, and then here soon we'll go into a little bit more depth. But I want to talk about just manual review as a whole. Like I mentioned earlier, the manual review is not an end-all be-all solution for any fraud program. We have a number of customers using our manual review tool, Pro Insight, to make some of these decisions a little bit faster. But at the end of the day, I want to put emphasis on the word manual. This does require this human element behind these tools to be able to make these decisions. But oftentimes, these levels of automation, no matter if you have the most sophisticated machine learning out there in the market, you have all the data available about all your customers, and you level all these rule sets and models. At the end of the day, fraudsters are going to take advantage of all of these systems. It's completely inevitable. There's no perfect solution, no matter if you are a mom and pop shop in Lincoln, Nebraska. If any of you are from Lincoln, Nebraska, that's just an example. I have nothing against Lincoln at all. Or if you're one of those big box stores that has a global footprint of 200 plus countries and you ship all over the world in any kind of given time frame, there's always going to be the human element needed. If you're an owner of a business and you review these transactions yourselves, or if you have an entire fraud team of 500 fraud analysts or manual review agents reviewing thousands upon thousands of transactions, models and machines can't do all the work. So I want to talk a little bit about what are some things within manual review that can help make these decisions a little bit faster. When I talk about customer satisfaction, this is kind of going back to the example of like the buying online, picking up in store. If I purchase something, I expect that as soon as I get to the store, everything is all hunky-dory and I can pick up my product and leave. Or if I purchase something online, I expect that my transaction is going to be approved and go through no problem or no questions asked, and I'm going to be getting my product within hours or a couple of days. But oftentimes, as a consumer, they don't always expect that there's all of these levels of review and automation and customer scoring behind the scenes that's going on and all this data flowing. They don't really expect it, and they don't know what's happening. And the best manual review programs can do it to the point where customers have absolutely no idea. For a long time, I didn't even know that this was happening. So from a manual review perspective, like I said, there is no perfect number for the time to review a transaction and make a decision. Or it could be 2 minutes, it could be 10 minutes. Obviously you'll have to find what makes the most sense for your business, but there are some things that can help. And I put them up here. First and foremost is scoring. And so what I mean by scoring is making sure that you have some sort of manual review solution in place, whether it be a tool, it could be within a fraud solution, or it could be a standalone tool such as something like Pro Insight that aggregates some of this customer data so you can make even faster decisions. Now, one of the benefits of having such a tool such as this is it essentially accumulates a lot of this data and aggregates it into one view. And one of the biggest things from a manual review perspective that we see manual review agents or fraud analysts have is that they have multiple screens up, multiple windows and tabs and browsers, you name it, in order just to make a decision on one transaction. Oftentimes they're scraping social data, whether it be they're on Facebook looking, does this person exist? They have all the transaction details, up there and on a different screen, and trying to layer all these things together. But that can be very time consuming. So having something like a score for a transaction can be very impactful for the time to a decision on a transaction. For example, within Pro Insight, we have what's called our identity review score. That might not mean nothing to you at the moment, but that's okay. But something like this really aggregates a lot of what we call our graph and our network data. So that really brings together some sophisticated machine learning, plus all of the customer transaction identity data details, such as person's name, their email address, maybe their shipping address and IP address, and brings all of these together to have a comprehensive score so that it can see one score for this transaction and automatically see if this is potential fraud or not, or risk or not. Of course, all of these things are really only impactful when paired, not, I want to say only impactful, but they're even more impactful when paired with a level of automation. We do have some customers who actually review every single transaction that comes through. That's kind of a stretch use case. They have very low volume but high dollar value products. So, oftentimes they can get away with reviewing every transaction. But what if you have tens of thousands of orders coming through in any given month? It's really important to have these tools in place where you can make those fast decisions, and scoring can help you do that. The second thing that I want to talk about pretty briefly here is data matches. I think it's fair to say that fraudsters are being more and more tricky every day. And so when talking about data matches, what I really mean here is, it's one thing to match my name to my email address. That's pretty easy to find online. Fraudsters will take advantage of that. And they'll build up what we call a synthetic identity. You probably all know of what that is, but essentially it's kind of piecing together some of these valid data points to make it look like a legitimate customer, or even having a stolen identity. Like I just mentioned, it's easy to find my name, my email address, perhaps even a shipping address, online can be pretty easy to find. So it's not that hard for a fraudster to just go and have all these data points ready to transact and make it look like it is me purchasing it. So it's important to not just rely on data matches. Please don't fall prey to them. And what I mean here is, it's one thing to have a data match and you can see it right in front of you, but it's also important to understand how all those data elements are interacting online. And I mentioned earlier, we have what we call our identity network here at Ekata. So that's really what is kind of the bread and butter of what we do here to be a differentiator is, it's one thing to understand the data points and how they're connected, but how they're interacting online is going to be absolutely key for making decisions on these transactions. Just as an example, I put another one up here of transaction velocity. So that's really how many times is this person transacting online in any given time frame. That's an example of some of the top signals that we see on our network is, like I mentioned in an earlier example, I might transact maybe 5 times in a week, but when that maybe the next following couple of days it spikes to 100 transactions in 2 days, that's kind of unusual behavior for somebody like me. So understanding some of those things that you're seeing out there in the market, can be really impactful to help build a whole holistic story of fraud behind that transaction or the potential risk for that transaction. Now, I talked through those pretty quickly, but I want to talk also a little bit about. Let me actually, sorry, go back a slide. I think I skipped ahead too quickly. Now, I talked a little bit about some of these very high level things that can, or tips that can help you all in reviewing these transactions faster and more efficiently. But there are some other things that I think are even more important or key to having a holistic fraud program, especially during the holidays. For example, I mentioned earlier, manual review is not the end all be all solution. It's absolutely critical that you pair this human element in manual review with some other levels of automation when possible to be able to make these decisions faster. Like I said, we have customers who have 50 transactions in a month or 50,000 in a month or even more than that, maybe millions. And of course, it's impossible to review every single transaction through there. we have, we even heard in one of our recent customer trainings, we have some customers who, each of their agents or analysts review 100 plus transactions in a day, which I know I wouldn't be able to do that. There is no way. But maybe with a tool and a process such as something like Pro Insight is definitely doable. But it's also important to have some simple rules in place that, even if whether you're a new merchant, just having an online presence, or if you've been in business for years and you're really trying to up level your fraud program, there's just some really simple ways that you can automatically accept and reject orders before something even gets to manual review. Of course, as a fraud analyst or a manual review agent, you want to spend the most time you can reviewing those transactions that the automation can't do itself. For example, having a simple reject, accept reject rules can be something such as, hey, maybe this email address was first seen online today. Maybe I need to push that through to manual review because, it's pretty coincidental that, somebody just created email and now they're transacting on it immediately. That's just one example. Maybe IP risk. We see this being, this varies quite a bit, but, how risky, how much more risky is it if they're on a proxy versus if they're just, surfing the web at their home? A lot more potential risk with an IP address. Or perhaps it's even something as simple as maybe some of your products have a really high dollar value. Maybe it's, $500 to $1,000 for one particular product versus $5. It could be something as simple as send everything that's more than $5 or sorry, $500 to manual review. Everything under $5, can be automatically either accepted, whatever that might be. Of course, there's a caveat. Fraudsters will take advantage of some of those things as well. So definitely something to keep in mind. Or even something as simple as, phone, is this phone a valid phone number? Is it a prepaid phone? Is it a non-fixed VoIP? So, having some specific simple rules in place can help kind of ease the stress on your manual review queues, especially during the holidays when these orders are going to spike in volume. Now, I want to talk about some things that you can actually do right now. Like Brad and I were mentioning earlier, it is only early August. So it is, of course, crazy to think that we're already considering what our game plan is for the holidays. I don't normally start thinking about the holiday time or Christmas or whatever holiday you celebrate here in November and December. I don't normally think about it until after Halloween here in the US is over with. It's difficult to keep up with at times, especially during COVID when some of these deals and sales are going on earlier than ever before. Black Friday typically would just be one day, sometimes two. Now it's oftentimes the whole entire weekend going into Cyber Monday. But even last year, we saw that some of these Black Friday deals were starting way even before, oftentimes even in October, deals were starting. So there are a lot of things that you can actually do now to really get started and prepare for, this high volume transaction, time period for the holidays. The first and foremost, ask questions. I think that's very straightforward, pretty simple. But if either you or your team or your perhaps even your department or fraud team are implementing new tools and solutions and you don't know something about it, ask questions. Hey, what does this mean? Always stay prepared. Because once it gets to a point where you're reviewing 100 plus transactions in any given day, during these high stress volume periods on your guys' systems, if you have a question, oftentimes there won't be as much time to look it up that you would normally have, like today. Second, of course,
I also want to jump in there for a second,
yeah.
Tim, and say on this topic of asking questions, something that we see come up time and time again when we talk to people is that there's not enough emphasis placed on process at the beginning of the year, at the beginning of the period. And I know you're going to talk about high volume days in terms of what to do for stressful times, and this ties in a little bit to that, but I want to really emphasize the need for people to think outside of the box in terms of how they get the attention of their managers and their managers' managers, and that there's an understanding of the flow of responsibility and the flow of work. Because too often we hear horror stories about something was seen in the data, something went wrong, and then nobody really knows what to do or who to go to, what to ask, who's in charge. It's all a mess because everybody's really locked in on whatever they were supposed to be doing beforehand, and nobody is anticipating the need for crisis control. So when we talk about asking questions, make sure that you're not just thinking about your order profile, your customer, what fraud trends you're seeing, but also your internal organization. And there isn't really any best practice there that anyone can give you, because every single organization is going to be unique in terms of its personality, in terms of its structure, in terms of its culture. But whatever that means to you, make sure that you have a dedicated conversation with whoever you need to have, setting up those procedures for what's going to happen when there are problems. It's avoidable. It's something you can take care of now in August, September, October, and hopefully 99 times out of 100, it'll be completely irrelevant and a non-issue. But that one time that something goes wrong and you can just break the glass and pull out a plan that everybody has already at least seen and discussed, it makes your life so much easier and really makes you look competent as well. So it's also a nice career booster, but it will also help you in those tough moments.
Yeah, thanks, Bradley. I couldn't have said that better. Yeah, that's absolutely critical, to get ahead of the game first in your internal processes, especially when it gets down to it. We all know that, as volume increases and as these times, get a little bit more chaotic once we're nearing the holiday season, there's going to be new members on your team, perhaps. Maybe they're seasonal employees or seasonal main review agents. So it's even more and more critical for you to understand the processes and maybe even help them out as well. So the kind of second box there of get training, what I really mean by this is, if you do have tools, or maybe it be a main review solution or a fraud platform that you all use in your day-to-day, it's important to understand how they work and function and how they work together to make decisions. So everything from, if you have a customer success manager you can reach out to for that organization to get a training for your team, learning the ins and outs of the tool, especially when it comes to making these critical decisions so fast, just adding a couple seconds to each of these transactions, given a time period of an entire year, can really start to add up on extra time that's wasted. So, the more and more the tool that you're using or the processes that you're using, the more and more efficient you will be. Another thing when I think of getting training is also, we've heard a lot of customers of ours actually either hire or implement some sort of train the trainer program, especially for manual review. If you have a larger manual review team, it can be very efficient and effective to have somebody who's kind of the in-house expert on the tools and systems, and that can help train these seasonal or part-time employees that are coming in to help out your business during these times. The next thing I want to just briefly touch on is just documenting trends. And Bradley and I kind of just briefly discussed this already. Of course, from an internal process perspective, it's going to be absolutely key. But also, when you're seeing new trends or interesting data points that you've not particularly seen before, this is going to be absolutely critical and can help actually, really help save potential false declines for your business. I mentioned an earlier example. I in particular only transact a few times in a day during the holidays or any given week. But during the holidays, it might be a few times in a day, and that can really kind of spike my velocity up there in transactions. But if you're seeing that across the board for all of your customers, it's important to kind of understand that that's a trend that's happening for your business. So the more and more you can see some of these situations, and the more and more you can document them, can really help your team out as well. Whether it be even just writing them in a notepad and sending some of the notes to your guys' team members as you're seeing these things come up. But it's definitely been proven to be very helpful when decisions need to be made on similar transactions. Another thing that I think is super important, of course, right now in these times is understanding kind of just different restrictions and regulations that are going on, in your area or even on a federal level. Especially when it comes to e-commerce, or even if you have kind of the traditional brick and mortar, if you have a storefront. it's really important to understand what are the local, regional, and federal level restrictions. Can my customers wear masks or excuse me, go maskless in a store or in our stores? What are our requirements? What is the government regulating? Because oftentimes that can really have an impact on folks if they're or your customers if they're want to go into your store or not, and that could really kind of put an interesting lens on from your customer standpoint. That could put an interesting lens on if they want to transact in your store, if they want to purchase online or go elsewhere. And the last thing I want to call out specifically is, and we call this high volume days, but essentially, of course, it can be difficult to understand what days are going to be kind of have these surges for transactions. It's not always going to be possible, but there's definitely are some things you can do to prepare for something like this. For example, if you know that your organization is releasing a new pair of, let's say, a new brand of sneakers or whatever it might be, and it's going to be on a specific release date, there's a good chance that that might have a high volume day because a lot of folks want this new product that's being released. So it's really important to understand, what is my company going to be shipping out this holiday? Are there any new product releases, or perhaps even understanding what sales are going to be going on? For example, if your org is saying on October 27th of 2021, we're going to be having a 50% off sale for a week, whatever it might be. It's really important to understand that, because that's what customers are going to take advantage of and getting those deals in the holiday time. So it's a good chance that those are going to have those high volumes for those days. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about just maintaining a healthy mindset. COVID has put stress on just about every person, it seems like, no matter what business we're in or what department or function, no matter what your job is. So it's important to maintain a healthy mindset, especially during the holidays. And there's a couple things I want to call out in particular. The first and foremost is it's really important to focus on what you can control. And what I really mean by this is you won't be able to control the number of transactions coming in. It's up to the consumers to really do that. You can't really control how many fraudsters are out there trying to take advantage of you or your business. You can't control the weather on how that takes a toll on shipping, for example. But what are some of the things you can control? As mentioned in some of the previous things we've shown on the other slide, you can, for example, control, how well versed you are in internal processes. You can control, how often or how much of an emphasis you're putting on paying attention to detail when you're reviewing these transactions and maintaining consistency. It's important. You can very much control if you understand, when product releases are happening for your business or what sales are going on and when. So those are definitely some things to keep in mind as we're nearing the holidays that you can't control. And don't worry too much about the volume as it comes in. Of course, the volume is always going to be there and it's going to spike and have its ebbs and flows, but it's important to focus on the things that you in particular you and your team members. Taking small breaks, I think this is absolutely key. I think it's super easy to get lost in the data. I do this in my own job. I'm a product marketer by trade, but oftentimes I'll be looking at customer data and analyzing, and as soon as I know it, 4 hours has gone by and it seems like I've done nothing. I just look at all these data. While it's fun for me to do that, I'm kind of a geek like that and like to look at these Excel files and be in Tableau and Salesforce, but it's also super important to take a mental break here and there. Like I mentioned, some of our customers review 50 to 75, even 100 transactions in a day. It can be very easy to just get lost in that. So when you have the time to, when whether you have specific breaks or if you have a few minutes to spare here and there, even something as simple as getting a cup of coffee or a glass of orange juice or taking your dog for a walk around the block can really kind of help clear your mind a little bit and come back so that you're more efficient when you come back. And that helps kind of maintain that consistency that I mentioned as well. When it comes to setting goals for yourself, I think all of us do this kind of, consciously in the back of our minds. We set goals for ourselves no matter what we do, but especially in the workplace, it's important to set goals that are achievable. Something like, I want to review 500 transactions tomorrow might not be as easy. but making sure that something is achievable can be very, very helpful. Just as an example, this is something that Rob Eleveld, our CEO here at Akata, has kind of drilled in me and a lot of other folks here at the businesses, just getting 1% better every day. Maybe something as simple as that, like, hey, I reviewed 70 transactions yesterday. Can I get to 72 tomorrow? Just something as simple as that, or even have it be, for my team members, I have a team of 5 fraud analysts. We want 0 false declines for the next 2 weeks, whatever that might be. Just setting very small, achievable goals for yourself can be very rewarding, especially come near the end of the holiday season. Finally, this goes back to a lot of the thoughts about knowing internal processes, just getting support. And this is more getting support in the workplace, making sure that your manager supports you and what you're doing, that your team members are there. Like maybe you need to take a day off here and there, making sure that you have the coverage that you need. So you don't have to stress about it when you finally get a chance to take a PTO day or spend time with family. I think it's absolutely critical to have the support you need and have a team that will support you when you need to take some of those breaks. So those are just some examples of ways that I normally maintain a healthy mindset. Obviously, this is not an exhaustive list. There's a lot more things you can do to help out. Bradley, is there anything else that you can think of that I might be missing here?
No, I think that's a really good list. I think it's just important, like you said at the top of this section, you don't want to get to a place where time is just flowing and you don't even realize what's going on. And I think when you hit that point, it's counterproductive to continue. And so I think that's something that should also be discussed with management beforehand about when are we taking breaks? What happens if I really feel that I'm in need of a break? Because otherwise you're not performing optimally and you're not doing anybody any good. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, that was all I had for today. I really appreciate everybody joining. We have plenty of time for some questions. Bradley and I are both here if you have any questions on, not just who is Ekata and what we do, but, what are some other things that we're seeing in the market? What are some other ways that we can help you prep for the holidays? We have plenty of time for some questions. So again, we appreciate all your guys' time. And please let us know if you have any questions.
I want to follow up on something here real quick and ask you if you're seeing any difference in how people are approaching the volume from this year versus last year in terms of whether or not the strategies that you might have started to use in 2020 are still applicable, or if you're seeing those evolve to the new realities that we're seeing this year.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I think it's fair to say that, I think it's going to be continuing to grow more and more every year when it comes to online shopping. We've seen it year over year. And of course, last year was a complete outlier from 5 to 10 years previous. But I think we're going to be seeing more and more that, folks are going to be transacting online who haven't been before. And that's really changing the online behavior that we normally would see, especially when it comes to some of our even Akata systems, like our data sets, like our identity network. So I think it's even more and more important to not just understand some of these new identities that are, having an online presence, but how they're interacting online is going to be the most critical in years moving forward, especially with the level of uncertainty. Last year, I think a lot of us kind of understood that, we're pretty much in lockdown for the holidays. Everything was going to be online. Some stores were open here and there, but for the most part, we were transacting online. Versus this year, I think there's a lot more uncertainty, even more so than last year. Of course, there's a lot of rules and regulations at a local and national level. From a COVID perspective, are changing things. It seems like almost daily. For example, here in King County, masks up again for us here in Seattle, but I think that's really gonna, start to kind of take a toll on how businesses kind of, operate, essentially, whether they have a physical storefront or move more of their things to online. So that's just kind of one example of that. But also, when it comes to this holiday, what is it going to look like with the new Delta variant? Is it going to be another lockdown? Is it, there's so much uncertainty out there that I think understanding online behavior is going to be the most critical during this holiday time.
Well, and I do have one bonus question here that we touched on a little bit, but not really directly, which is, what do you suggest for managers out there who are setting up their fraud teams? What have you found to be the optimal structure with the companies that you've worked at? Some best practices, some worst practices about what the org chart should look like and who should be responsible for what?
That's a really good question. I've seen, honestly, I've seen things just completely across the board as far as team structure. Whether it be having some sort of manager or team lead with a number of management review agents beneath them. But I think it also does depend on how your company is structured in general. I see a number of customers of ours who have different teams dispersed by maybe geographical or geographically. Maybe they have a different fraud team for Latin America, a different one for North America, et cetera. A different one for EMEA and Asia Pacific. But so that's just one example of how different teams might be structured in that sense, especially in looking at data globally. It can be difficult to understand exactly how some of these various things might be nuanced in different countries and different locations. But I think as a best practice, what I've seen by far is definitely, as I mentioned earlier, of having some sort of review manager or a team trainer is going to be absolutely key, especially if you're just now building out your fraud team or expanding it. I think it's fair to say that there is some seasonality when it comes to fraud analysts and management review agents, especially the higher volume you have. Typically, the more temporary employees you might have, be hiring. So having somebody that really understands your rules and processes and your tools and systems to help onboard all of these new seasonal employees consistently is going to be pretty critical. And I think that's one of the points that we actually made in. I think you all will be getting a document here, which here at Ekata we call like our top 5 tips for manual review, and I think that is one of the top 5 is to implement a train the trainer kind of situation there.
Awesome. Yeah, we're going to be sending that out to everyone, and I think that's a pretty good place to leave it, unless you have any final thoughts. But
yeah, I think we had one more question come in actually, and this is more of a kind of a technical question about Pro Insight as a product. And just so you all know, we'll be having many different upcoming kind of product related webinars and demos available to you all here in the next couple of months. So highly recommend that you all keep an eye on your inbox for invites coming out from us. We'd love to have you for a demo so I can show you Pro Insight, show you the ins and outs of the tool and how it can help your business, and we'll do a deep dive there. But the question that did come in is, what kind of data makes up an identity score? So this is, I'll keep this as brief as possible, but for here at Ekata in particular, we have our identity risk score, and this is kind of an all-encompassing score for a particular identity or a transaction within our tool Pro Insight. And so what this consists of really is this kind of merges together identity data such as the name, phone, email address, shipping address, and IP, and how all of those elements are paired together. So for example, does my name match this email address? Is this email address consistent with a shipping address, and so on? But also, how is this interacting online? This is going back to kind of our identity network that I briefly touched on of how many times is this are these data elements being used in transactions in the last 24 hours or last 2 weeks? How many merchants are seeing this identity data in their business? If it's 100 merchants in a day, that's pretty darn risky, versus 10 merchants in 2 weeks is a little bit less risky than we would normally see. And so this score really encompasses both of those things, kind of paired up with some sophisticated machine learning that, I'm not a machine learning expert. I wouldn't know too much about it, but there's a level of some machine learning on top of that to really get a comprehensive view of a score for that particular transaction. And it's on a score of 0 to 500. So let's say 450 would be much more risky, and the score of 50 would be less risky. So maybe in your simple rules and models in place, you can set up a, if identity risk score is less than 50, but more than 450, either automatically accept or reject. Everything else goes to manual review. That's just a very crude example, but that's what can help kind of alleviate some of that stress on your review queues during the
And we did
holidays.
just get another question come in.
Yeah.
Is there any data pulled by Akata Pro that could be used as evidence to fight chargebacks?
It's a very interesting question. So definitely, again, a lot of that goes back to a lot of that, what I call our identity graph data and network data in combination. So understanding how all these data elements are interacting online and how they're linked together will definitely help with evidence against chargebacks. I haven't heard that one too much in particular, but the data is definitely something that would be proven useful. And we have a number of customers that definitely have decreased chargeback rates in their fraud programs as a result of implementing Pro Insight.
All right. Well, Tim, we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for this really informative and really helpful presentation. So important for everyone to be prepared for the holiday season. And we thank everyone for attending. We'll be sending out copies of everything in the coming days. And Tim, why don't you let everyone know where they can find Ekata on the web, and then we'll sign off.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much, Bradley. Again, yes, thank you from me as well for everyone joining. If you just go to akata.com, you can see there at the logo at the top, it's just ekata.com. You'll find a number of different resources available, whether it be kind of how-to guides, solutions that we offer in the market. We have a number of different API solutions on top of our Pro Insight is just one of our many solutions, but we have a number of different API solutions as well that you all can kind of help up level your level of automation for your fraud program. So definitely check out our website to learn more. And again, we're going to be having a number of different, whether it be a lunch and learn or some sort of Pro Insight kind of in-depth demos that we would love to have you all join us for.
All right. Well, thanks so much again. I hope everyone takes care of themselves in these increasingly uncertain times. And we look forward to seeing you again for our next event. Thanks so much, Tim.
Yeah, thank you so much. You have a great day.